We are examining the assumptions we make in order to understand international trade. We have already made three assumptions and examined them in great detail, namely, number one, economic agents are rational and have perfect knowledge. The second one being that we are looking at a 2 by 2 by 2 world. There are two countries. Each country produces and consumes two goods, clothing and food, and there are two factors of production, labor and capital. So 2 by 2 by 2 world. The third assumption we have made is absence of money illusion. Now we make the fourth assumption, and that is community indifference curves exist for each country and are well defined. Now when we use the term community, what we are looking at is essentially a country or the people living in a country, and indifference curves represent preferences of consumers living in a country. And so what we believe is community indifference curves exist for each country and they are well defined. And what we'll do is we'll make life easy for ourselves. We'll examine the indifference curve or the preferences of one consumer, and we'll assume the same thing applies to millions of people living in a country, or the indifference curve, which is for one person, is also the community indifference curve, which is relevant for an entire country. In order to understand consumer preferences, we make the following assumptions. The first assumption about consumer preferences is something we have already covered when we started out making assumptions for international trade, and that is rationality and perfect knowledge. Once again, rationality from consumer's perspective means the consumer wants to maximize satisfaction, and perfect knowledge means the consumer knows all that has to be known about the product and its price. The second assumption we make about consumer preferences is called completeness. And by this we mean a consumer can rank any two commodity bundles in terms of preference. And what this essentially means is you're given any two choices, you should be able to say whether you prefer this over that or that over this or maybe both. And as long as you can do it for all choices you have, you satisfy the condition for completeness. Now I've used the term commodity bundles here, and this is how we represent a commodity bundle. We'll do it in parentheses, and what we'll do is we'll write units of C first, units of clothing, and followed by units of food. This is an ordered pair, and what this means is the first number within parentheses always represents the value of the good on the x-axis, and the second number will represent the value of the good on the y-axis. And since we have been using the x-axis to represent clothing and y-axis to represent food, so we'll write x, y values. That's what we'll do. Now, so this is how we would represent any commodity bundle. Now suppose you are given as an example some commodity bundle, let's call it A, and you are given another commodity bundle which is B, and what the consumer should be able to tell us whether A is preferred over B, and this is how we write it, APB, that means A is preferred over B, or he should be able to make a statement like B is preferred over A, or he could make a statement that both of them are true, that is APB and BPA. And if we make a statement where APB and BPA are true, that means the consumer is equally satisfied. between two commodity bundles A and B, or in other words, he is indifferent between A and B. The third assumption we make about consumer preferences is called transitivity, and transitivity is a mathematical property, and I'll explain this in a minute. And what this ensures is consistency in terms of choice. Look at the following. We know, suppose we make a statement that 7 is greater than 5, and then we make another statement 5 is greater than 3. Then because of transitivity, we can say for sure that 7 is greater than 3. In terms of consumer preferences, for example, consumer tells us A is preferred over B, and then also tells us B is preferred over C. Then because of this assumption, what this implies is A must be preferred over C. The fourth assumption we make about consumer preferences is called non-satiety, and the literal meaning of this is you are never satisfied or you are greedy. And remember, in economics we take greedy behavior to be all right. We do not judge people. And so non-satiety essentially means you always prefer more to less of a good. For example, if you have one car, you would prefer to have two cars. If you have two cars, you would prefer to have, say, 10 cars. You always prefer more to less of a good, non-satiety. So we have made 4 assumptions about consumer preferences, and we are looking at one consumer, and we believe whatever applies to one consumer applies to all consumers living within a country. And the 4 assumptions we have made is 1. Rationality and perfect knowledge. The second assumption we have made is called completeness, and completeness simply means that you can rank any two commodity bundles in terms of preference. The third assumption we have made is transitivity, and this ensures that there's consistency in terms of choice or in terms of preferences. And the last assumption we have made is non-satiety, which essentially means you are never satisfied or you prefer more to less of it. Now let us work through an example, and let us try to rank commodity bundles in terms of preference. We are given commodity bundle A, B, C, and D, and each of these commodity bundles are written in a fashion that the first number represents the units of clothing, the second number represents the units of food, and it applies to each of these commodity bundles. Based on the assumptions we have made, let us try to compare commodity bundle B to A, then C to A, and then D to A. So we compare B, C, or D to commodity bundle A. Now consider commodity bundles A and B. In commodity bundle B, this person has same amount of clothing, which is 2 units. But in commodity bundle B, this person has more food relative to commodity bundle A. So it will be safe for us to say, based on the assumptions we have made, and that is B must be preferred over A, BPA. Now let us compare C to A, and what you find is, when you compare C to A, what you find is this person has more clothing in C relative to A and the same amount of food. And so this means, again based on non-satiety, C must be preferred over A. Now let us make a comparison of commodity bundle D with commodity bundle A. And what you find here is This person has more clothing, 1 unit of clothing which is more in D relative to A, but the unit of food in D is lower than units of food in A. Or in other words, when you compare D with A, what you find is this person has more of one good and less of another good. And now in a situation like this, it is entirely up to the consumer to tell us whether A will be preferred over D or D will be preferred over A, or it is entirely possible the consumer may tell us that he is equally satisfied with these two commodity bundles A and D, or he is indifferent between commodity bundles A and D, and so I represents indifference. And so this is how we make comparisons in terms of the assumptions we have made. And this completes our basic discussion about assumptions of community indifference curves. In the next video, we'll watch and try to understand the properties of indifference curves. Thank you for your time.